I'm Randy Denzer, and this is Eddie. And we're going to be talking to you a little bit about some stuff that my subject's going to be a little bit different than his, and what I'm going to do is run through my stuff first. Once we get through mine, I'll give Eddie a chance to speak, and then at the very end, we'll do a question and answer session. So it's really funny because when Eric called me and said, "Hey, would you speak, at the conference?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he goes, I said, "What do you want the subject to be?" And he said, "Anything." And I said, "Well, if it's going to be anything, then I'm going to do, the effects of Allsup's burritos on the body." And he said, No. It's got to be kind of related to, it's got to be related to the fire stuff. So let me make sure that this clicker works, and we'll get started. All right, the clicker's not working. Okay, so how do I make sure it's on? You see anything on there? Maybe that'll work. What's that? Here we go. Hopefully this works. Okay, so my topic tonight starts off with having a fun chase, right? You're all having a really good time chasing a nice storm someplace, and it's going really great. You're high on adrenaline, everything's going really, really good, and then all of a sudden, oops. Hang on. Wow, it skipped a slide. And then that happens, right? And what I want to do is be able to talk to you about a few points on this thing to, on basically when you get into a disaster, how to operate, what some things to do, some things not to do, and some things to look out for. And I'll go back to who I am. And I started spotting in the Dallas area in about 1990, 1991. I was on a little volunteer fire department, so my first days of actually chasing, which was local chasing, I was doing on a fire truck going code 3, so that was a lot of fun. Throughout the 90s I did that. It seems like I got to see a lot of tornadoes and a lot of severe storms. I always, when we got to the county line and got to the edge of our territory, I always wanted to be able to keep going, but I couldn't because we had to stay in district. So finally in the early 2000s I started storm chasing. So for anybody that's been around for a long time, I was lucky enough to chase with Vern Carlson and a bunch of other guys back in the day and had a blast. I'm not nearly as active as I was back then because I've got life responsibilities that have kept taking me away from stuff, but that's about to change, and I'll explain that in a second. My day job, obviously I'm wearing this uniform for a reason, is I'm Battalion 2B shift with the Austin Fire Department. So I run an entire northwest side of Austin on the B shift. I'm also a vice president of our union. I'm very involved in wildfire response in the state of Texas. I take crews out all the time, not just in Texas, but California and all over. I'm also work for the International Association of Firefighters. I'm in a wildfire task force and a lead instructor for both the United States and Canada. On the weather side today, I'm still on AMS committees for fire weather, and anybody who's been through the online Skywarn program, I helped build the ACES program, so we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. So we talked about that. You're having a good chase, and then all of a sudden you show up in this. My question is, how many of you all in here have been chasing someplace, having a good time, and showed up on something bad? I figured about that many. For those of you who haven't, the longer you chase, the more likelihood of it happening. And when you do, there are some things that I want to talk to you about on what to do and what not to do. And I want to talk to you about rendering aid, what that means, what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. I want to talk to you a little bit about being safe. This whole thing. How many firefighters, police, and medics do we have in the room? It does not apply to y'all. You do have to do something usually. Depending on your state laws, I don't have a choice. In the state of Texas, I'm a state commissioned firefighter. If I come up on an accident, I don't have a choice. I got to stop and help, okay? But as far as Good Samaritan laws, I'm gonna cover one here in a minute, you don't have to stop and help. I need you to understand that. Why is it people stop and help? Because we're good, right? Good people stop and help. I mean, we don't want to see other people suffering. If there's something we can do to help, then we kind of want to help. I encourage you to do so, but there's some parameters you need to follow when you do stop to help. We'll talk about those. So out of the people who raised their hands and said they've stopped at a car accident, how many of you have ever stopped to help out a destroyed home? Okay, how about a destroyed town or city? How many of you all have been in a major disaster? And that's exactly kind of the percentages I thought, right? It's no fun, huh? All of a sudden you got that adrenaline rush going, man, you're having a great time, you're cruising along, everything's going great, and next thing you know, that tornado's going through a city, right? Or you got a major hailstorm going through someplace. That changes everything. And that creates a lot of stress on you, on the people that just happened to, and the responders. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that as I go on. Are chasers more prone to experience this stuff? Absolutely, right? It's part of it, right? I don't think anybody in this room is gonna say, yeah, I just can't wait to go to the next disaster, right? I just don't believe that. I think what we wanna see is tornadoes are out in the middle of nowhere. So, Good Samaritans, what's a Good Samaritan? It's somebody who stops and helps out. I want to put this picture up because the guy, let me see if you can see him. Well, now it's kind of cut off. Okay, the guy in the yellow shirt in that top picture, his name is Fred McGee. And the picture below, it's kind of not cut off, but you can see in the background, that's the state capitol. I was on my way home from work one day, looked over and saw a police officer carrying an AED, which was a big deal because our cops didn't have AEDs at the time. It was the first AED the city of Austin ever put on a police car. And this cop happened to be at the right place at the right time. And he was running over there with this AED, and I saw it, and I was like, what the heck? So I pulled over and ran over to where he was at, and Fred McGee, the guy in the yellow shirt, was doing chest compressions on the guy in the black tank top. So we sat there, we worked on the guy and everything else. We put that AED on, and it gave us a shockable rhythm. We hit zap, and the guy came back, right? I've never seen, it's really interesting because in my world, in my line of work, we make saves on occasion and stuff like that, but nobody's ever really excited. I've never seen somebody so excited in my life as Fred was after that moment. So if anything, you stop to help out. If it ends up really being a good thing, it can be the best thing that ever happened to in your life, right? If it doesn't work out, like a lot of times, then it doesn't work out. But being a good Samaritan is a good thing. So we're going to talk about how to help. And it starts with step one, which is calling 911. And the reason I wanted it, I know it seems simple, it seems like it would be a no-brainer, but I need you to understand something. Anybody that's in this room, storm chasers, even though you look around, you see other people on the phone calling 911, I really need you to start calling 911. And here's why. You go to a 911 call center in Austin, Texas. I've been in there a bunch of times. Phones are ringing like crazy, right? You pull up on something, right? You're a storm chaser. You're kind of an adrenaline junkie. Anybody in here not an adrenaline junkie? You wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't, right? If somebody's not an adrenaline junkie, then whatever. So you should be able to handle stress a little bit better than the average Joe citizen, right? Does anybody disagree? You should be able to handle stress better. So when you listen to those calls that come into the 911 center and you see something like this, you know, or you listen to the calls from that, average Joe who's lived in the house next door will tell you that, oh my God, the whole city's destroyed, right? Is that accurate? It's not. I'm sorry that the picture's cut off, but what I was going to point out was that the glass is intact on the house next door, which has, you know, that's pretty significant, right? I mean, if the glass is still intact, it wasn't a very large spread tornado, obviously. If houses were destroyed here, Tim Marshall will have to explain that to you, but the truth of the matter is if there's only one or two houses on the ground, that's really what you need to report, right? So I would rather, and I encourage you to understand that you're better off calling 911 because you will be able to provide better information than the guy or girl who's really wound up. You're going to see locals on the phone like this. They're probably screaming, oh my God, hurry up and send help, it's terrible. You all will be able to, in a calm manner, be able to say, we have 3 houses on the ground, I have power lines down, you know, and this is at the corner of this street and that street. You're going to give a better, more accurate description to the call, to the 911 center. So I encourage you, if that's all you do, you realize you've just rendered aid. You've started the ball rolling in the right direction. That's the most critical thing for us. So how to be an asset. Good size up is what I was just talking about. You've got to make sure that you relay to them what you actually see, not projections. You can't sit there and say, well, I bet you the whole city's destroyed. Right? What you want to, just like when you're reporting a storm, you want to make sure that you say, hey, listen, I have 3 houses on the ground, you know, I have power lines down, they look like they're residential lines, I have walking wounded, you know, blah, blah, blah. You just say exactly what you see. Don't make any projections or whatever else. But that size up begins the process for us when I show up on a fire engine. Back when I was an engine officer or company officer on a ladder truck or an engine, when I pull in, the first thing that I have to do is size up the scene. It looks really weird to the citizens when you pull up to a big disaster and I get out of the truck and me and my guys are actually just looking around. Looks like we're not doing anything. Truth of the matter is we're doing the most important job that needs to be done at that point in time, which is actually getting the ball rolling in the right direction. Because once I get engaged in patient care and I've got a guy laying over here and we start doing that, we're not able to provide that critical information back to dispatch to get the right amount of resources coming. And the right amount of resources means the right amount of resources. It's really kind of an odd thing to understand, but if you said, oh my God, send everything, and we send everything and we don't need everything, that's just as bad as not sending enough, just so you all know. It's really, having too many resources, I saw that at Greensburg, is a disaster. But getting that ball rolling starts with a really good 911 call. Please be the ones who do it. So if you decide to go on beyond just actually calling in and doing the 911 notification, if you decide to move forward, there's a rule that you need to follow. Rule number 1. What is that rule number 1? Don't get hurt, don't become part of the problem, right? It's really easy to do. It's really funny because when I was putting this presentation together, I just typed in Good Samaritan, and you know what most of the stories are about? It's about good people who got killed trying to help other people out, usually at car wrecks. Take a look at this one. I'll whip through it real quick because it's hard to read. The person was killed walking back to their SUV after helping out. right? There are so many stories, story after story after story of Good Samaritans getting killed. That means that person doesn't get to spend their retirement. That means that person doesn't get to go home to their loved ones. They don't get to see their daughter from high school. That's scary. Or from anything else, right? It's really funny because I'm a good Christian man, and I had a Houston captain not too long ago tell me something. He goes, Randy, I've never seen a happy dead guy, right? So let's just stay alive. Rule number one, don't get killed. Don't become part of the problem. The moment you become part of the problem, you've increased our workload. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we're not going to do everything we can to help you out, because we are. We're not going to be mad at you. But the truth of the matter is try not to become part of the problem. So don't get hurt or killed. Don't become part of the problem, and follow ACEs. How many of you all know about ACEs? Anybody heard about ACEs? Okay, so me and Josh Jans built that. We adapted it from the wildland world of LCES and put it into ACEs, because ACEs was easier to think. We'll talk about it a little bit more here in a second. A couple things I want to talk about on hazards. How many hazards do you see here? There are so many hazards, man. It's amazing when you go into a disaster area. For those who have been in disaster areas, these are very, very dangerous areas. There's so many dangers there. It's literally, you could sit there and write down probably 150 different hazards that you face in these places. And I started writing them down and stuff, and I was going to do it. And the one thing I want to make sure that you all understand, that your best asset for helping an incident commander might be, and that is providing real radar information. I'm telling you right now, I've done that a bunch of times in Kansas, and through the years, I've pulled up to an incident commander someplace or that first in company and said, hey, there's no storms coming for 15 to 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. Do you think that's valuable information? Yeah, absolutely. That might be that storm chaser thing that we all should start to do, is try really hard to find the incident commander, don't interrupt him or her, wait for the right time and say, I have live weather information for you. I promise you, they're going to say, stay right here, stand beside me. We'll talk about how they act here in a second. Yep, and because one of the most important things we got to worry about, how many have ever been at a tornado someplace, have done damage, and then you still have a tornado coming through? Medicine Lodge, Kansas, years back, I was on a tornado that ripped the Robinson's house apart. That was a long time ago. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden a tornado came up. We had to take shelter inside the basement of the house that was already torn down, because we had a tornado do the same path. So I want to talk real quick about power lines, and two different hazards, power lines and then people. Power lines, what I want everybody to understand is, please always treat them like they're live. One of the worst fatalities I've been to in my life, of all the fatalities, the worst fatalities I've seen are usually electrocutions. You don't want to be electrocuted. It's not fun, right? I will tell you that the grids are run by a computer, so when a computer recognizes that, hey, we've got a power loss in an area, the computer tries to reset. And I'm speaking in very general terms. This is not, don't quote me on this. I'm just telling you, I've been taught so many different ways about this, but the commonalities that I've been told is that they'll try to reset those power lines 3 times, right? Anywhere from 15-second intervals, depending on where you're at, to 15-minute intervals. So a dead power line can re-energize. But there's something even worse that's going on today, and that's that backfeed. And I'm seeing this every time we go to house fires these days. What happens now, there's such an increase. Everybody has home generators now, right? Especially after last year in Texas with the ice storm, the generator sales went up like 900%, and all my neighbors have them now. We all have home generators. Do you think that a licensed electrician installed those generators? Those generators, Uncle Joe or Nancy's brother, who used to be an electrician back in the 70s and stuff, and they don't put that backfeed protection in. Solar panels are the same way. We had a close call about 3 months ago at a house fire where the outside division claimed the power was cut, and a solar panel power backfed through a line and zapped somebody, one of our firefighters on the incident. Enough so they got put in an ambulance. So they'll backfeed. So with all these home generators, if they don't have the right cutoff system in place, it will backfeed. So you could be sitting there and all you are walking around in power lines, everything's cool, and all of a sudden in 1 second it's not cool. Because usually when there's power lines in the ground, you think it's wet too. So it conducts a lot of, that water carries. So it's please, always, 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 no matter what you see, pretend like the power lines is live. I don't care if you have 10 people standing there jibber jabbering, I don't go near them. If Greensburg or wherever else I've been in the disasters, I'll tell you a funny story about cops. Because we had 2 cops join up with some firefighters to do search and rescue in Greensburg. And I told my buddy, I kept doing this to him, and he's like, what are you doing, man? I said, let these cops walk ahead of us in the water right to the power lines. Let them walk in first. If they get electrocuted, we're going the other way. I swear that's true. So another thing that needs to be relayed to 911 is whether they're intermediate transmission lines, residential. I know that this is kind of hard, but there's 3 different size power lines generally. Okay, there's the big transmission lines and the big giant power poles, that kids like to climb. There's intermediates, which is what these are, then there's residential. If you can tell them what size lines it is, it's a big help. And the reason is because whatever you're telling them, if you're near a big city someplace, the firefighter are getting their information through a computer. They type it all in. I got it sitting in front of me, and so I'm reading it as we show up, right? It's giving me all my size up information I can get even before I get there. And in there it will say, hey, there's intermediate lines on the ground. As soon as I see that, I press my button and I say, dispatch from engine 23, will you do me a favor, notify electric? I want to go ahead and shut the grid down at the corner of Cameron and Runberg Road, please. We have the authority to do that, shut grids down in those areas. But we need to know, because I'm not going to do that for a residential line. But if you said I have a transmission line down, I'm going to go ahead and shut the grid down in that area. Okay, this is the other big hazard I want to talk to you about, because this is going to lead into my final discussion today. So you see that guy? Pretty mad, isn't he? That's what people look like in disasters. You know why? Because that guy is going to tell you that his family, and I know this from experience, he's going to tell you that his family is stuck in the basement, and he wants you to come help him get him out. You're walking around in there, right, because you've decided to go in and help. This is one of the biggest hazards I've faced, and probably one of the biggest learning experiences I've ever had through my disasters. I'm not surprised by it anymore. I know that, and that's why I'm trying to relay this on to you. This guy right now is facing a big crisis because his wife and kids are trapped in a basement. But the truth of the matter is that the people who are trapped in their basements and okay, that's one thing. The people who are trapped in their basements and are not okay, who are actually injured, are the ones we need to go help first. So on these disasters, when you show up, there's not enough people. I wish there was. I've showed up on a lot of stuff in Austin. I've been in big fatality fires and big, ice storms, everything else. I wish we always had enough people, but we don't. So we have to do this really painful thing, which is called triage. And so we show up, we size up the incident. The next step is for me to start triaging what we're going to do, right? Put an action plan in place. When I put my action plan in place, it might be not paying attention to the people who are just trapped, because I have to get to people who are injured. And so with that being said, you all need to realize that when you go into one of these disaster areas, that he is rightfully angry. He's really wound up because of incident stress. Incident stress affects everybody. It's going to affect you, it affects the first responders, and it affects the people who just went through it, right? We're going to talk more about that here in a sec. But I'm just going to tell you that he is probably rightfully so angry. He's just been through a really terrible thing, and he demands that you just walking down the street, for God's sakes, the last thing you want to do is, while this guy's doing this, you don't want to take pictures of his house, do you? Right? Be very mindful and respectful of that. It seems like, I know we have laws that protect us, with the media and everything else for doing that, but there's a right time and a right place for that. The right time is not while this guy's out there mad at you or mad at everybody because he wants somebody to come and help, because you're an able body, man. I need you to come and help me move some freaking lumber out of the way so we can get him out, right? And the stress is real. Stress is real on both sides. You're going to be under stress too. So risk-benefit analysis, I just want to briefly go over this. Risk-benefit analysis. When we pull up someplace, I'm trained, and I've been trained for years to identify hazards and then perform a risk-benefit analysis. I do it in about 6 seconds, just based on my experiences. I've had a lot of experiences since I started driving a fire engine in 1979. That dates me, doesn't it? Risk-benefit analysis, RBA. So what I want you to understand is this. if you decide to go help, remember, is the risk worth it for the reward? So in other words, risk versus reward. Is this really worth it? And what I'm trying to tell you is this. You see that disaster area, there's good reason for you not to do anything. Just get on the phone and call and not go in there. I'm not going to tell you that's not okay. It's okay if you're not trained to do it or whatever else. Sometimes that's what you got to do, because you got to understand that if you don't do an RBA, you don't do a risk benefit, you might go in there and get yourself hurt or injured. So you pull up to a car with there we go, thanks. So you pull up to a car that's been on fire for a while and somebody's in there and you want to reach in there and grab somebody. This is kind of painful to talk about, but the survivability profile is pretty low, right? Or is it worth the risk to try to get to something that's not viable anymore, a person that's not viable? It's a tough decision to make. This is the stuff that firefighters do pretty regular basis, right? We do this risk-benefit analysis. Is it worthwhile to put firefighters into flood water when we know that they get swept away all the time and we lose firefighters' lives every year? The swift water, is it worth it, or do we wait till the water goes down? Right? Sometimes it just wait for a while and things will get better, and sometimes they don't. So make sure that you understand that when you go in someplace, you really got to think about what risk you're taking, and is it going to benefit? Is it going to help people out? You have to make that decision. That's up to y'all. So let's say you've done your risk benefit and it's time to lend a hand. How can you do that? So we talked about it already. Make sure you maintain your ACEs. Awareness is situational awareness. Maintain your situational awareness. The problem is, and there's lots of books out there on situational awareness. I've been through I don't know how much training on situational awareness. Truth of the matter is that it's really hard to maintain situational awareness unless you're standing there doing nothing but looking around. And it's really interesting because the next time you see a disaster and you see fire companies, you'll notice that there's always usually somebody who's standing there doing nothing but looking around. We have to stand there, and the company officer is maintaining safety for their crew just by sitting there and scanning everything and watching out for new hazards. Communications, if you're going to walk into a disaster scene, I highly, 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 I can't say this enough, call your wife, brother, mother, sister, whoever. Call a fellow chaser and let them know, hey, listen, I just pulled up in a really, really bad scene. I'm going to go in and try to help out. And then I will check back in an hour. Let somebody know what you're doing. Because guess what? If you haven't called back in 2 or 3 hours, they need to call somebody and say, hey, my buddy was there and he decided to go help out and I haven't heard back from him. That lets us know that we got to go look for somebody. Escape routes, always maintain 2 whenever possible. Make sure that you identify your escape routes. I never go anywhere where I can't get out of, and it's really a bad thing because I know this guy does it too. When we go to restaurants, just so you all know, the way we're trained, we do weird things. I never have my back to the door, right? I always look for 2 ways out of the restaurant. I guarantee he does too. We just don't even know we do it anymore. We've been doing it for so long. And safety zone. When I say a safety zone, if you're not sure about weather coming, make sure that you can protect yourself from hail and tornadoes. Make sure that you have some place. And a safety zone's only good if you know you can get to it. So if I identify a safety zone, it's 3 blocks away, but yet we got something coming, it's going to mean that I have to get to my safety zone in 15 seconds. I'm not going to be able to make 3 blocks in 15 seconds. So you got to make sure it's close enough to work. So I'm going to go over just real quick the Good Samaritan laws. If you're not a firefighter or police or EMS, then you have laws that actually protect you from liability as long as you do a couple things. We're going to talk about those couple things, right? Remember, calling 911 is rendering aid. The laws that are out there to protect Good Samaritans are dependent on the state you're in. I looked at a bunch of different ones. There's some real, I guess, some basic generalities that I want to talk to you about. Number 1, you don't have to help, right? You are not in a position, unless you're already in the first responder community, you don't have to help. We do it because of the goodness of our heart. We got good people in here. You've done it before, and I hope you do it again safely. The underlying part I need you to pay close attention to that. You have to act rationally, in good faith, and at your level of training. At your level of training, right? So you can't go in there and all of a sudden say, hey, my God, this guy's choking. I'm going to do a tracheotomy on him. I'm going to go ahead and cut his throat to do it or whatever. That's not your level of training, right? You have to operate within your level of training. On this one, it says that, on this one I pulled up, it says that you basically have to have emergency care has to be given, you know, and not in a grossly negligent way. In other words, again, you have to do, you know, rational things, and you can't be the one who caused the emergency. So they won't cover you if you crash into somebody and it was your fault, and then you go try to help them out. You still do it, but that's not what this is. It has to be in a result of emergency, and you can't be the one who caused the issue. I don't think anybody in here can cause a disaster. So, best thing I can tell everybody in this room, and I can't say this enough, is get CPR training. Can't say it enough. Get CPR training. Get CPR training. If you want to take it a step further, get a first aid class. There's a new thing out in Texas called Emergency Medical Responder. I think that's National Registry, so I think that's everywhere. There are classes that are 40 hours out there that might save your family's lives. You might save your family's lives or your friend's life. You just don't know. Once you have this training, it might be amazing who you end up using it on. You have no idea. But it sure would be nice to be able to do something for somebody in your household when they need it, right? You know, I'm going to tell you something when we get to the last slides. There's nothing worse in this world than feeling helpless, right? So you all are in a risk. We've all agreed to this. You're all in a higher risk of coming across disasters or bad emergency scenes. So since you're at a higher risk, I'd highly recommend you get some training. And it's available. You just look on the internet. So the first responders arrive. They're here, thank God. Everything's going to be okay, right? Wrong. So I want you to know that the first responders, when they show up, I talked to you about sizing up and stuff. They got a lot on their plate. I'm going to talk about their stress. This is their community usually. First ones there, this is their community. Might be the worst thing they've ever seen, right? In their own community, they're under stress. I know this for a fact. I've been there, done that. And I deal with good Samaritans and bystanders all the time. And I'll tell you something, 90% of the time they're fantastic. 10% of the time they're kind of a pain in the butt. And there's actually 1% that we have to do something about them. But most of the time, they're really, really good, all right? But understand something. When the first responders show up and they get out of their rigs and they're doing that looking around thing and it looks like deer in the headlights, they're actually processing stuff. Don't think they're ignoring you. Just be patient. Stand there and say, hey, I got some information for you. You want some information? They'll usually look at you and say, okay, what do you got, right? But let them kind of process what they're processing. If you run right up to a company engine officer just getting off of a fire engine, off a ladder truck, a rescue truck, whatever, if I'm just getting off and you come up and try to get in my face and start talking, that's not the time to do it. I'm going to ask you to stand back. I'm not being rude. It will come across as being rude, but please understand the first responders are not being rude to you. This is a big deal for them. They got a lot on their plate. They got a lot of responsibility ahead of them, right? Just try to relax a little bit, be a little bit patient, and then at the right time, that person's going to look at you. I'm going to tell you that I've had bystanders that I've put in for major awards. I've sought out Good Samaritans that I've put in for some major awards. The tornado that went through Rowlett back in Christmas tornado a couple years ago, there was a guy there that worked with me all night long that I put in for a major award. The city of Rowlett gave him, I don't know, some type of I don't know what it was, what award it was, but I got to go there and watch him get it presented to him because he did such a good job. Just be patient and understand the stress. Okay? And I can talk really loud there. So we already talked about triage. I'll skip that. And just know my whole point of this is I just want everybody to understand that there's stress at all levels. Everybody's under stress, okay? And the good information to pass on, I want you to say, when you pass on their stuff, if you can write it down or whatever else, I'm going to tell you something. I know it. Just say, hey, here's my name and number if you have any other questions. I've wished that 100 times. I've had so many people I wish I could have said thank you to that guy. He probably thought I was a giant, you know what. because I was under stress. I wish I would have had his name and number or her name and number so I could call him back and say, hey, listen, I really appreciate what you did. I'm sorry I wasn't in my right frame of mind, but I have a lot going on. I had a lot going on at that moment. So if you can, I know it sounds crazy, but try to write down your name and number. Just say, hey, if you have any questions, sir, just give me a call. I wish that 100 times. Real quick before we go to the last little section, DECON. So if you ever go in and help in one of these disaster areas, you have no idea what could be on you. You could have crystal meth on you, right? You would not believe all the stuff that's in here. There have been a lot of studies done on our firefighting PPE that just one incident, they take our PPE away from us and then they go in and analyze it and stuff just from smoke and everything else. The stuff on there is crazy. So this is something that most people don't know, but one of the first things we do when we leave a disaster scene, especially water rescues anymore, is we decon. We do gross decon at the scene. We'll spray the heck out of everybody, before they take their gear off. Then when they get back to the station, they shower right away. And we use soap and all kinds of these wipes that they have for us now that kind of helps try to get all that other goo off. Because there's in those disaster scenes, remember that just knock toilets down, right? So there's poo and there's kinds of fun stuff out there. So make sure you decon yourself. Don't forget to do that. So this is the last thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to Eddie. So I've already taught you about incident stress and what it does. And I've studied this for years, and I've been a part of studies and everything else on incident stress. And folks, I manage fires every week. I manage big incidents every week. And I just know this for a fact. And it's really funny because it's not until late in your career where I'm talking to other firefighters or buddies like Jeff Petrowski. We just talked about it a little bit ago. Man, all this stuff is cumulative. There's responder stress. There's stress on those victims that were just part of this disaster, and there's going to be stress on you. When you pull into an incident that you were just high as a kite on from an adrenaline rush, and you pull into a major disaster, it has a profound effect on you, whether you realize it or not. After Greensburg, I was really blessed. And then what I was blessed about was that I had some crews that I worked with at the time. I was on Engine 40 in Austin. And after I got back from Greensburg, it took me about 5 days. And Engine 40, Ladder 40 personnel sat me down and said, hey, you're not yourself right now. What's up? You need to go get help. And I said, what? You guys are crazy. And they said, no, you haven't been yourself since you got back from that thing. You're not the same happy guy that you were before you left. I went and got help for about 6 months, okay? This stuff is tough. These disasters are tough. Me and Jeff were just talking about it. It's tough stuff, and it's cumulative. So if you've been to more than one or two of them, it builds up. This incident stress, post-incident stress is a real deal. So what I want you to all know is that there is a phone number, and I don't care if you write the phone number down now, but what I would ask of you is understand that you can get on Google and say, hey, I was just at a disaster, I need help, disaster helpline. I called this number and told them I was doing this presentation, and they were like, oh my God, that's great. And we started talking about it. I said, what resources? Well, this is through FEMA, and they will put you in touch with people, even non-first. But you don't have to know the phone number. Just know that you can look at Google and say disaster helpline. So I encourage you, after you go to the next disaster, if you pull up, even if it's a couple houses or whatever, if you start feeling bad, you feel a little bit blue, a little bit on edge, you needed somebody to talk to, you call them, and guess what you're going to talk to? You're going to talk to people who know exactly what you're going through, right? I guarantee it, people working these lines are the same. They're people who have been through it before. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and then if you have any questions later on, we'll do it after Eddie. Jeez. Eric Fox isn't here.
Oh, is this one?
This one is.
Good? Whoa, sorry. All right, guys, I'm Eddie Aldrine. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you for the board of directors for having Randy and I up here to talk. Randy talked about the safety side of things. I'm going to be kind of talking about the do's and don'ts of the legal side of things when we're out chasing. So I'm Deputy Eddie Aldrine. I work for the Cass County Sheriff's Office in Cass County, Missouri. It's the next county south of the Kansas City metro area. So we get a little bit of rural, we get a little bit of urban calls in our county. I used to be a police officer at El Dorado, Kansas, and Derby, Kansas, which are both suburbs of Wichita. Was down there for a while, took a little break, figured out I missed being in law enforcement, went back 2 years ago. Actually, 2 years ago today, I started at Cass County. So, patrol deputy there, born and raised in Topeka, Kansas. I've lived in Wichita, was in the Air Force for a while. Now I live in Belton, which is in the far northwest corner of Cass County. So, chasing professionally for 14 years, so since 2007. Before that, I was chasing storms right when I could drive. So I'm 39 now, so cops are bad at math, so I can't really do that off the top of my head, but been doing it for a while, so it's a good hobby. The job keeps me busy, so I don't get out as much as I used to. To get this joke out of the way, people ask, this is your joke, Randy. How many donuts have I had today? I have had 0 donuts, but I've had tons of power rings. Those are my favorite. Now this next one is pretty self-explanatory. I just got to change a picture. Now for you guys, it's a pig who caught another pig. So I don't know which one's more unhappy, but all right. So here's our overview. Being in law enforcement, I know a lot of people don't like us, and I want to make sure that I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you guidance to keep you out of trouble when you're chasing, okay? We'll go over general laws. Due to time, not because we're running short tonight, but just because going through every state that we can chase in, it'll take forever talking about laws. So just tonight, I'm going to talk about Kansas, the best state ever. I know you Texas people are kind of, yeah. Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas. And then if we have time, we'll go over questions too. So general laws, I mean, we all know we need to stop at stoplights, stop signs. I'm not going to say who this chaser was, but some of us older guys know who that was that ran a stop sign, killed himself, his friend, and then another innocent person in a car. So with speed, keep it within reason. I know if you need to get out of the way of a tornado, do what you need to do. But once you're not actively going, if you're jumping from storm to storm, be smart about it. I mean, obviously, the faster we go, the more dangerous it is. So there is one thing that us law enforcement officers have, and every state has this statute. It's called the basic speed rule. We don't have to catch you or anyone else on our radar to be able to write a speeding ticket. We can know just by looking how fast that you're going, saying, yeah, that guy's definitely way over the speed limit. So that's one thing you really have to watch out for. And I don't write a whole lot of tickets, but if someone deserves it, is being stupid, then we have to do what we do, and a lot of law enforcement officers are that same way. Also, watching and passing on straights. I know a lot of people like to cut it close. We have a famous truck that passed on a curve a few years ago. That's a big no-no. And then passing on hills, you got to watch out for too. So Kansas. The big thing that a lot of chasers do that I've seen, and I'm guilty of it too, driving across farmland to kind of save some time. We all saw it in Twister, driving through cornfields and things of that sort. If you're caught doing that, you can catch a charge for property damage. And depending on the amount, you could get a fine or even be a charge of misdemeanor. So with a misdemeanor, you can do jail time. With the criminal charges, you can get that, but you can also get civil charges from the farmer or the landowner who owns that, who could sue you civilly for damages for that. The obeying the lawful order, that comes from law enforcement and fire. Say we have a road shut down because there's damage there, it's too dangerous for people to go past. If you go around that thing, you could be charged with a misdemeanor. And one thing I want to tell you guys, these 3 laws here, they're not only laws in Kansas, they're in pretty much every other state too. But just to make it simple, I put it on this slide. So the subsequent states after this, then they also have same laws like that. Now we all know driving a big hail, you'll break a windshield. That's a big law. It's kind of hard to explain. Law enforcement, they can stop you just because you have a broken out windshield. Now, they should be smart enough to know that there's storms in the area and that you couldn't help yourself. But that can give them a reason to stop you and go further. Nebraska, so who was down in Mangum, Oklahoma for the tornado? Gerard and Beth, a bunch of guys. There was that one intersection there where traffic was backed up forever because everyone and their best friend was on this storm. I saw a lot of people that were wanting to go straight or turn left that went into the other driving lane and did that, or they went on the shoulder and did that too. So Nebraska, that is a state statute that you cannot do that. And like I said about Kansas, that law is in every other state too. So with reckless driving, it really depends on the law enforcement officer, what he does. There's certain elements of the crime that he has to check off to charge someone with that. But with your first offense, that's a class 3 misdemeanor, so that's a ticket, could be jail time if you want. Second offense, class 2. Third offense is a class 1, which class 1 misdemeanor is right below felony. So if you have subsequent reckless driving charges on your thing, you could go straight to a third, even if it's your first time getting it that day. So what was it? Jordan, what was the big outbreak that was in Wichita in 2012, April 14th? Yeah. Up in Solomon, Kansas, which is west of Wichita, in between, or not west of Wichita, west of Topeka and east of Salina, kind of right in the middle. There's a bunch of people that were stopping on bridges. And those of us who have been around for a while knew about the county emergency manager who was bad-mouthing chasers because of that, when it was actually a lot of his local chasers that were doing that. So because bridges don't have wide enough shoulders for us to park on, and even though they give us good vantage points for storms, don't do it because your vehicle will be in the driving lane and then it can cause a crash. I got the same problem as you. All right, Colorado. I know a lot of chasers have been outfitting their cars with sirens and PA systems. Every state that I've talked about tonight and will talk about, and even the ones that aren't included in the slideshow, all have laws about no sirens or no PA systems. So I know a bunch of people put these PA systems on their cars to notify people of impending tornado or whatever. That's a big no-no too. I believe almost every state that I looked at, it was a misdemeanor. So that's definitely something you don't want. Now, Colorado being recreational marijuana, we got to talk about that. You can get driving under an influence when you're high on marijuana, just like as if you were drunk on alcohol. So you really got to watch for that. Colorado has a no open container law, just like if you had open beer can or liquor. So it can't have any broken seals. The contents have to all be there. It can be partially missing. And then there's no evidence of consumption inside the vehicle. And then if you were to buy some there in Colorado and bring it over into Kansas or any other states that border Colorado, you can get federal charges on transporting, and then also get state charges from that too. So it could really hem you up, make your bad day. Definitely something that you guys don't need, so just be smart about it. Oklahoma, this is another law that has in every state. Crossing railroad barriers or ones that have the flashing lights with no barriers. If those are down and the lights are going, do not go across. Because I've worked plenty of train versus car accidents in my line of work where they aren't too pretty, and they're there to protect you guys and to protect others, and that poor train operator that has to deal with killing someone when he couldn't slow down in time. Now with radar jammers and detectors, I know a lot of people have them. Every state has laws against them, I believe. I think there's a few outliers that don't. But just watch out for those. That's another thing that can give probable cause to a law enforcement officer to pull you over. We all know people in the chasing community like light bars and flashing lights. Every state has a law saying that you can't do that. So as long as you're moving, driving down the road, you can't have those things on. But once you're stopped, it's okay to turn them on, just as if you had your hazard lights on your car. And what was that at the bottom? Oh, yeah. So emergency vehicles, you can read it here. It's pretty long. Storm chasing vehicles do not fall underneath any of that. So just to protect you guys, keep you guys out of trouble, make sure you guys keep those in check when you're going down the road. Now Texas, my second favorite state. One thing I like about Texas, they have a lot of good cell phone usage laws. So no one under 18 can operate a motor vehicle, MV, while on a cell phone. So no texting, cell phone calling, look at radar, radar scope or Pickle 3. Now, I don't know what the fascination is with it. People outfit their cars and trucks with horns that sound like trains. Every state has a law against that, especially I don't think you can get one that's under 300 decibels. So it scared the living heck out of people. Crap, I fat fingered it. Yeah. It is fun to scare people, but it can be dangerous. And then no red or blue flashing lights. You can get impersonating a law enforcement officer deal, which is a felony. So that's bad news. One thing to help out Randy, and it applies to law enforcement vehicles too, do not follow them into a disaster scene. That's another charge that you guys can get. Now, I know that we can make some good money with pictures and video of tornadoes going through storms, but that can make your day pretty bad after that. No driving over fire hoses, things of that sort, because you can cut one and then it totally kills their firefighting operations.